it makes sense that we would have these temporal landmarks, right? A birthday typically has a certain celebration. We've all had downer birthdays and better birthdays, but New Year's the idea is that, that it's a celebration of sorts that we're marking the passage. Obviously, we all know what New Year's is, marking the passage of another cycle around the sun. But it is thought that the celebration and the dopamine associated with celebration does create a kind of neurobiological temporal landmark that we really can think of it as everything of past and everything of future as not just in 2021 versus in 2022, but prior to that dopamine release and post that dopamine release. Interesting stuff, actually, when you think about it, the conversion of an external cue about time and the milestone in time to an internal biological cue. Because of course, neurons don't know anything about years or dates. They only know chemicals and electrical signals. That's the currency and those are the vowels and syllables. Excuse me. Those are the vowels and syllables of the nervous system. So I think that when we think about temporal cues, we don't want to delude ourselves. We don't want to think that something magical happens on January 1. On the other hand, there does seem to be a real neurobiological substrate marking the passage of time, in this case, dopamine. And a very particular style of dopamine release at that. So I think that the important thing in adopting these positive behaviors is it really does make sense that you in a very detailed and concrete way, that you identify that this time is different than the previous time, meaning previous epoch. I always want to use these scientific words. It's not something we hear, but the previous epoch, it is the appropriate word, but the previous sort of bin of time, that you could say 2021 or even December 2021. But how finely we parse time is also going to predict the likelihood that we're going to be able to initiate and maintain behavioral change. And this is where I think Pat and I, in preparing for this, really converged to a strong degree. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that was my sense, which is that there's absolutely no reason why these behavioral changes have to be approached from the standpoint of all of 2021. That's the hope. But maybe we could lend ourselves a favor by taking smaller time bins and trying to embark on behavioral change within smaller time bins. Pat's talked about this before, and I've really adopted a lot of the language and thinking around this notion of moving the horizon. This is something that he described as one of the many ways in which he moved through SEAL team training and work in the SEAL teams, which is that under conditions of uncertainty and discomfort, but in particular uncertainty, what you try and do is create a circumstance in which everything is 100% certain or close to it. And so the way to do that is to move in the space horizon, meaning only try and affect things in the environment in which you can immediately act, and in the immediate temporal horizon, meaning within the time frame that you can, and then move that horizon out further and further.